Welcome into September. I almost said August. No, it's September, Balky. September 19th, 2024. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I am your host, Eric Balkman. You know me from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and of course, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. I am joined tonight, a man of many talents, a man who cannot pick just one company to peddle his wares at because he's just too darn talented. Please welcome in, back onto the show, actually, a guy who has been on this program twice now. This will be his third time. Two more times and you get a free 5-timers jacket, just like SNL. He writes about football for the 33rd team and Fantasy Points, and he is the co-host of the Nate and Herms show over at Optimus Fantasy. You follow him on the X at CH_Herms. Please welcome CH Herms. What's up, Herms?
Howdy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to being here for this and talking about some foosball.
This is great because last time I don't think you had those killer sideburns. So this is fantastic, a
Oh, yeah.
fantastic treat tonight. That looks great.
Got to look good for the audience. That's
What
what I always say.
what was the inspiration for that? Because I haven't had like chops like that in quite a while.
A few things. Partially laziness. I got halfway through, kind of shaving. It was like, this feels good enough. And then also, I can't do like a full beard, but the sideburns have always been strong. So I was like, you know what? Let's just leave that, see how it feels. And I guess so far the feedback is good. So,
Yeah, it is good. It's very good. So I can't remember if we talked about this before. I think we did. Are you still in a band? Are you still making music?
I am not in a band at this point in my life, but you can hear some of my musical handiwork on a few different podcast theme songs throughout the
Okay.
biz. You'll always hear like a little watermark in the intro with like a super high pitched voice saying, "Is that Herms?" And that's how you know it's a Herms original joint. So I'm out there. You can hear my music. You just have to really listen for it.
I got it. Okay, fantastic stuff. That's good to know. CH Herms we'll be enjoying CH Herms for the following 2 hours here on the Better Sports Network. On the show tonight, we're going to go around the NFL, some breaking injury news that I think is important to bring up. We'll talk about George Kittle. And I think we'll touch on Evan Engram a little bit too. I think that's worth talking about since nobody was talking about it last week. We'll get into your Thursday night football preview. It is an AFC East showdown tonight. We'll get into the fantasy angles about that, including Hunter Henry, Braylon Allen, Tyler Conklin, and much more. Herms and I are going to put together an FFPC Weekly Challenge lineup for this week. That will lead off hour number 2, and then we'll go into a massive start or sit section to close out the show. And I never do this, Herms, but for you, I did. I'm including defenses in here tonight because you apparently, according to the Fantasy Pros ranking, are a defense whisperer.
I don't know how. I mean, I try hard to rank them, obviously. It's not like I don't have any process whatsoever, but like even I'm just like blown away by some of these results. Like something must be working that I'm doing. So I'm just gonna keep going for it. And as long as this analysis works, I'm happy.
Yeah, well, you're making our viewers happy too. Plenty of people already chiming in on the YouTube and the Twitch right now that are taking in the show tonight. Hey, I want to remind everybody that not only are Herms and I putting together an FFPC Weekly Challenge lineup, but you can do the same at myffpc.com. There's no draft, there's no salary cap in this. You just choose 10 players or 12 players, depending upon if you want to play with kickers and defenses, and then just watch them play throughout the weekend. Only one player per NFL team, no stacking. You can win up to $2,500. You can enter for as little as $35 in 10, 30, and 100 team contests. That's over at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Shout out to the man behind the glass tonight. He is Sean Engel, and he is going to be taking us through the next 2 hours, pushing all the right buttons. Let's get into it, Herms. George Kittle held out of today's practice with hamstring tightness, according to Adam Schefter. Initially, Kittle was not spotted at practice and was experiencing tightness in the hamstring. And then he stated on the X, no practice today. His status for Sunday's game is now in question. What stinks about this is the game is a late game. It's a 4:25 game against the Rams, where the Niners are going on the road. If you have George Kittle, chances are, I would think most people who have Kittle do not have a second tight end on their team. And now, not only do they probably have to grab one, you got to kind of figure this out because it's a late game. You might have to make a decision. Do I start Cole Kmet in the early games or do I start George Kittle? Do I start, I'm trying to think of another good example here. Um, my goodness, maybe there's just not that many good tight ends. Cade Otton,
Honestly, tight ends are a problem. Yeah.
do I start Cade Otton at 1 o'clock or do I wait on George Kittle? How would you be handling this? And Herms, I don't know what your ownership is like with Kittle, but how are you handling this specifically this week?
I mean, it definitely stinks, with how many tight ends aren't doing particularly well, which I think, as evidenced by the fact that we could, coming up with a name off the top of the head is kind of, tough to do.
Mhm.
Like sticking it out's probably going to be, the easiest thing to do. But I just throwing it out there as a bonus for people, the Monday night game. Well, we have two of them this week,
Right.
but one of them between the Commanders and Bengals does feature a couple interesting guys, Zach Ertz and Mike Gesicki, who play much later. So, like, they're broadly available enough to the point where you could probably pick up one of those guys, wait and kind of see with George Kittle, and then you have a fallback plan for the next day. I think that's probably what I would go ahead and do. But if those options aren't available to you, then I guess maybe cross your fingers and just pray, hope. I don't know.
I think, and what's great about the FFPC too is you'll have that Sunday morning waiver run, so you'll kind of know what Kittle does in practice on Friday,
Yeah.
which I think is the biggest day, and you can make your adjustment there. Now, with tight end premium scoring, it could be slim pickings, and if that's the case, then you might just want it like what Herms is saying, just cross your fingers, hold your breath, and maybe Kittle will play. But you'll know. I mean, if that dude doesn't practice Friday, you need to make other plans. I was all over Gesicki and Ertz on the waiver wire this week. I picked him up as backup tight ends in a lot of spots. I cut Tyler Conklin, who we're going to talk about in the next segment, in a lot of spots in favor of those guys. But that is the nice thing about four teams playing Monday night, is there are more tight end options with this Kittle news. So be watching that over the next couple of days for sure. Evan Engram, who was the surprise inactive on Sunday morning, did not participate in practice yesterday and did not participate in practice today. Now, he is a Monday night game against the Bills. Evan Strange was out there with Evan Engram not playing, and he was all right against Cleveland. I don't know if you want to roll with that again this week, but if you do have Engram and your only backup is Brenton Strange, I don't know if I'd go out with in trying to pick up another tight end. I think I might just go with Engram and Strange and hope for the best at that point. But with Engram, this is not looking good either, Herms. And if I have a decent option at 1 o'clock, I'm not waiting around for Monday night. I'm playing that option at 1.
I don't blame you at all, and it's especially disappointing because for as weird as some of the pass catchers have been in Jacksonville, like, Christian Kirk hasn't really done a whole heck of a lot. Gabe Davis hasn't been super reliable, but that one game, the opener, Evan Ingram saw a lot of looks. It seemed like he's really supposed to be a central focus of this offense. So, like, it definitely is irritating. But like you said, we don't really have the luxury of time and waiting around to figure that out. So if you have a better option, you probably should just go ahead and do that. The odds aren't in your favor in the same way that the George Kittle situation is.
I'm trying to what I wanted to look at, and I should have did this before we came on the air tonight, but I wanted to look at to see in that Jaguars Cleveland game from week 2, the line for Brenton Strange in that game is incoming right now. He ended up getting 3 catches, 65 yards. He did see 6 targets, which was second highest on the team because behind, of course, Gabe Davis, which blows my mind. But Brenton Strange, as far as FFPC scoring goes, that's an 11-point game, and you'll take that if Evan Engram can't go. So Brenton Strange is a guy that I think if you have Engram, you're not liking anybody else. If Gesicki's gone, if Ertz is gone, pick up Brenton Strange and go with God. Let's go to the YouTube chat right now, and we got a defense question right away. To me, this is an open and shut one, although I like both these defenses this week. Bo Murphy Packers, exclamation point times 10, wants to know, should I start the New York Jets defense tonight against the Patriots at home, the Jets are, or should he go with the Raiders defense that is also at home with the Andy Dalton-led Carolina Panthers coming to town? Herms, I'm starting both these defenses in more than one league for me this week. But if I had these two on the same team, I'm rolling with the Jets tonight.
Both choices are great choices. Honestly, I don't think you're going to go wrong either way. My personal preference, I'm leaning a little bit more toward the Raiders going up against the Panthers because I don't think Andy Dalton coming in and becoming the starting quarterback necessarily solves a lot of their problems.
Right.
The offensive line that they invested over $100 million in free agency still has not done a whole heck of a lot. they still really have to get that running game going between Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and all those guys back there. So I just kind of envision that defensive front keeping Andy Dalton on his butt a lot and forcing some turnovers. But either they're both top 12 units this week. Frankly, I think you're going to be fine either direction you go.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too, and I could be wrong on the exact number on this, but I believe after Bryce Young got benched, and Dalton was named the starter, the total went up on the game by like a point, and Carolina actually got a point back, or a half point, or a full point back. So maybe there is something to be said about Dalton being an improvement. Now, Herms, to your point, this probably creates as many problems as it solves with Dalton at quarterback too. So I do like that. And honestly, if it was Bryce Young against the Raiders, I probably would be starting the Raiders over the Jets tonight too. Let's go to It's Drewby on Twitch tonight with a tight end question. Pat Freiermuth or Hunter Henry tonight? Freiermuth is at home against the Chargers. Hunter Henry is going to be in New York tonight. And boy, was Henry awesome last week. We'll get into this more in the second segment. But I'm rolling with Henry. He's been a high value, high targeted player in this offense. And I still don't really know what to expect from Justin Fields as far as passing the ball and where it's going to go. So I'm going to go with Hunter Henry here.
I'm completely with you. I mean, I'm diehard beloved Steelers fan. Love me some Pat Freiermuth, but he's only seeing maybe 3 or 4 targets a game. Yeah, he's catching most of them, but they're not going very far. This passing offense really doesn't have anything, you know, not a lot of juice behind it per se.
Right.
Whereas Henry, we've already seen what he's capable of going off. We'll get into further detail with it later, of course, but just he's going to be a little bit more consistent for you, probably. I think that's the better option.
Yeah, that is definitely the better option, in my opinion, as well. Over to Untamed Music on YouTube. Yo, last week I flexed Brian Thomas Jr. over Mark Andrews. I was right about that one in half-point PPR. Do I continue with the rookie and Thomas, or does he go back to Mark Andrews this week? The reason Mark Andrews is a flex option is because I have Sam Laporta. So if he does go with Andrews, he's taking up the flex spot because Sam Laporta is his starting tight end. So this is what it comes down to this week, Herms, for the flex for Untamed Music. Are we rocking with Brian Thomas Jr. this week again? He is at Buffalo this week. Or we can go with Mark Andrews, who is going to be in Dallas. How do you feel about this one?
I mean, the Bills' defense is pretty tough. I'm pretty sure that that's going to be a detriment to somebody like Brian Thomas Jr., especially because, just like we were alluding to a little bit earlier, the Jags passing offense, for the most part, still hasn't gotten into its groove yet. But like Mark Andrews really came into his own a little bit more last week. The season opener was a little bit bizarre in seeing how much Isaiah Likely was involved. I think you're probably better served going with somebody like Mark Andrews in this type of thing. Brian Thomas Jr. most other weeks, I'm just very afraid of that Bills secondary.
I'll bring this up too. Isaiah Likely ran a lot fewer routes. I don't have the number in front of me, but he ran a lot fewer routes in week 2 than he did week 1. Mark Andrews was second on the team in targets this past week with 5. He catches 4 of them for 51 yards. So that's how heavily he was involved in that Ravens passing game. Now, flip it over to Jacksonville. While you did have Brian Thomas make that big play, keep in mind that dude only saw 4 targets. It was big plays. I mean, he had the 66 yarder, and then he also had, what would it have been, a 28 yarder. But those are his only 2 catches. And I don't know how sticky those big plays are for Thomas. He has been making them in the first couple of weeks, but I usually, even in half PPR Herms, I usually go in favor of the guy, of the volume guy who is seeing more targets. That's Andrews. And I also think Andrews is a better bet to score a touchdown. Could be wrong on that, but I think most signs point to Andrews as the flex for Untamed Music here this week over Brian Thomas Jr. Joe King on YouTube. Charbs or Wilson too soon to lose faith in Wilson? Now, which Wilson are we talking about here? Am I assuming incorrectly that it can't be Jeff Wilson, right? Garrett Wilson? Michael Wilson?
It could be any one of. The difficult thing with Charbonnet is that we still really need to see if Ken Walker is going to be available or not to play. I think that decision is going to be greatly impacted, regardless of which Wilson, on just continuing to follow the practice reports. I think that's probably going to give you your most amount of clarity.
I think I am going. I mean, assuming it is Garrett Wilson, as Joe King just
Oh,
puts in. Yeah,
okay.
I'm. It's Garrett Wilson tonight, or you got to wait around to see if Kenneth Walker is playing at 4:05 on Sunday. I'm playing Wilson tonight, and we'll see what.
Definitely.
I think it's just a matter of time. I know, and again, we'll get into this in the next segment, but I I think it's a matter of time before this Rogers Wilson connection starts clicking, and maybe it clicks as soon as tonight. New England does have a decent defense. So we'll see what happens there. But it'd be really tough for me to say, yeah, let's assume Walker is out and I'm going to play Charbonnet over Garrett Wilson. I can't do it. A trade question from King A Blocks on YouTube, excuse me, on Twitch. Would you give up Dalton Kincaid and Brian Thomas Jr. for Trey McBride? Now, in trades like this, Herms, I always like getting the best player in the deal. I think that McBride is the best player in the deal, assuming, even if it's not tight end premium, McBride is a guy that's catching a lot of passes. However, if I do need a receiver, I think I might be willing to take the downgrade to Kincaid. I'm still a believer in Kincaid. Maybe you could talk about where you stand on Dalton Kincaid right now, as for a slow start the slow start he's gotten off to. But in this case, I think it's obviously a downgrade. But if I need a receiver and I can get Thomas, yeah, I think this is one I might pull the trigger on.
Yeah, Kincaid's an interesting one. I want to keep the faith because there are a lot of things going for him in his favor. The fact that he is running a 100% route participation, that's pretty cool. You definitely love to see that. And then also last week, his targets at least doubled from 2 to 4. It's all
Mm-hmm.
trending in the right direction. I think we just really need to be a little bit more patient with some of these guys, especially because for a position like tight end that already kind of seldom sees target opportunities anyway, like 2 weeks, very small sample size. I think as things unfold, we're going to see the gap between them kind of close a little bit. But I mean, if you're really in a difficult spot now and you think that that's going to be the big thing, like Trey McBride is in a very prominent feature role in his offense. And I don't think that you can go wrong. Like you said, getting the best player in the
Mm-hmm.
trade. I would be more interested to find out, what other receivers this person has to work with. But yeah, in general, I can see it working out.
We have a question from Scott Hoyt on YouTube. Scott Hoyt was my guest on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown this past Tuesday. The guy who is leading the FFPC main event right now, and he's
Ooh.
coming to our little show tonight to ask for advice. This is more of a Ravens tight end question. We all knew Andrews would get the targets after week 1. Is that the norm? I still think Likely plays a pivotal role, and I happen to agree with Scott, who has Likely on his FFPC main event leading team. I still think that he does play a pivotal role in that. And I think part of the reason that Andrews was drafted after guys like Laporta and Kelsey and Kincaid I think was because of the presence of Likely. So I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 type thing between Andrews and Likely going forward. But Herms, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Likely outplay Andrews and out fantasy point him in, I don't know, 5 or 6 games this season. It may be closer to 50-50 than a lot of people think.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, you just look at the ecosystem of the offense and you look at just how many capable pass catchers they have. You have Zay Flowers, who's very talented at wide receiver, Justice Hill being, kind of the change of pace in the backfield opposite Derrick Henry. But then after that, it's those two tight ends. Just
Mhm.
we're ranking them by some sort of like skill or whatever. The rest of the wide receiver core in Baltimore does not really have the type of player that can be relied upon for heavy volume. So when you have two really good tight ends like this, particularly one like Likely, whose skill set lends itself more to being a pseudo wide receiver anyway, quote unquote, yeah, it kind of makes sense for them to continue to roll with that and see what evolving some type of role like that could end up looking like for this offense. I think that that is definitely something that we'll continue to see. So, like, yeah, both are interesting guys.
And both look like the clear number 2 and number 3 targets to Zay Flowers, who had 11
Yeah.
targets last week. I'm going to go to Unwary Might on Twitch. Now, Herms, I'm going to go through this pretty quick because it's pretty lengthy. I am playing Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, if I have this guy's team over Steele, Ty Chandler, and Samaj P. Ryan. And then I'm playing the 3 receivers, Jalen Waddle, Chris Godwin, and Devontae Smith. I'm still playing Jalen Waddle, even with Skylar Thompson, over Rashid Shaheed. This is I'm going to follow this up with and bearded hipster RL. I'm going to get to you in a second, but Scott Kobe, a guy who I've had on multiple shows of mine before in the past. He's a longtime FFPC player. I saw Carson Steele going for megabucks. Is he a good start this week, or is the Chiefs backfield just too muddied to go with him? And this kind of goes into my answer to unwary might. I want to see what happens with the Chiefs this week. I want to see how they treat Carson Steele, how they treat Samaje Perine. You know, they elevated Keontae Ingram onto the active roster. They signed Kareem Hunt to the practice squad. And somebody on X was saying the other day, you know, they're going to sign McKinnon too, and McKinnon's going to screw this whole thing up as well. So for me, yeah, I want pieces on my roster. I want no part of starting any of these guys in week 3.
I couldn't put it any better myself, to be honest. Yeah, like somebody from this backfield is going to do something really cool, and we're going to be really happy if we have them. But we're not going to know until it happens.
And that person might be different every week too. Like it could be a Carson Steele week this week. It could be a Perine week next week. It could be a Kareem Hunt in week 5 or 6. You know, we just don't know these things. And until we see what happens, I'm playing. Nobody's on bye this week. Hopefully you have better options where you don't have to start one of these Chiefs guys as desperation. Bearded Hipster RL. This might be a stupid question, but I'm just iffy on it. Ramondre Stevenson or Gibbs this week. There are no such things as stupid questions. Just stupid people. No, I'm just kidding. That is, I've heard that phrase before. This is definitely not a stupid question, Bearded Hipster. This is a decision you got to make tonight between Stevenson and Gibbs. I am still rolling with Gibbs. I'm not at the point of the season where I'm going to make sweeping generalizations based on 2 weeks of play. You drafted Gibbs over Stevenson. I don't think the matchup for Stevenson is all that great tonight. And I saw a stat, something like, this dude has been hit in the backfield. I can't remember what it was, but he's getting no blocking right now from that New England offensive line is the gist of it. A hardcore statistical analysis for me tonight, I know. But that's the thing. It's like I can't trust the O-line, but I can trust Detroit's O-line, one of the best in the league, and I can trust the Detroit offense. Don't overthink it. Play Gibbs over Stevenson.
Max, I mean, the Lions have had their, share of, minor struggles, quote unquote, to open the season, but they're still one of the league's best offenses, and Gibbs has a huge role in it. So you trust that.
Now, this is an interesting one, too, from Maiden Focus. Would hate to pass on Braylon Allen tonight, only to find out that Joe Mixon is active. Not sure I mind starting Braylon Allen over Jalen Naylor anyway, though, leaning Braylon Allen. So I think the question here is, Braylon Allen or Jalen Naylor. And I don't know if there's a Texans running back, if he's got Akers. This is a really confusing one. But I can tell you that I don't feel really good about starting Braylon Allen tonight, regardless of his 2 touchdowns last week and how good he's looked in the first 2 weeks. I don't want to start him. I don't want to flex him out.
Yeah, Braylon Allen, to his credit, looked pretty good on those limited touches he got, but we can't overreact too hard to a guy finding the end zone twice when his teammates still touch the ball over 20 times. Like, this is still Breece Hall's backfield. I don't know that this is going to be a weekly thing for Braylon Allen. So, yeah, I would also kind of want to pump the brakes on that.
Let's go to Scott Kobe, back to him. Do both of you downgrade Mike Evans this week because of Patrick Surtain? And if you have Calvin Ridley on your bench, do you start Ridley over Evans? Now, this is an involved one right now. Let's look at this. So Surtain last week for the Broncos was playing against the Steelers, and I watched parts of this game, and I remember that Surtain giving up some catches in that game. Like he looked all right, but he didn't look otherworldly or anything like that. So it's tough for me to say who's the guy that always owns Evans. Is that Marshawn Lattimore? That always seems that. And so yeah, if it's not Lattimore, I'm not too worried about it. Famous last words, I know, but no, I would still go with Evans over Ridley, and I don't really think about it too much here in this matchup. What about you, Herms?
I mean, look, anytime a player goes up against a really talented corner, it's worth mentioning. There's a reason that people, focus a lot on wide receiver cornerback matchups. But the receiver we're talking about is somebody who is an automatic 1,000-yard machine that's going to have a really cool bust of his own in Canton, Ohio someday. So for him, not really that concerned about it. This Bucs offense is soaring right now, and I'm going to continue to invest in it until I am given a reason not to.
Yeah. I think that's accurate, and I would agree with that for the most part too. I think as many questions as we get. I know we got a lot of stuff to get to, but I want to keep addressing all the questions that are popping up in the YouTube and keep them coming, guys. This is great. Dom Gazzetti, one of my new buddies in the FFPC and the KFFSC, actually. In a super flex, he has an embarrassment of riches at receiver. He's got CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Harrison Jr., Chris Godwin, Jamison Williams, George Pickens. His running backs are James Conner, Zamir White, and Ezekiel Elliott. He wants to trade away a receiver for a running back. Which one for Ramondre Stevenson? Now, this is interesting because this gets into the whole trade philosophy, Herms, is like, how do you offer trades? Well, I think what you need to do now that you've zeroed in on the player that you wanted in Ramondre Stevenson, you go to that owner and say, hey, I'm looking to get Stevenson. I'm looking to trade one of these receivers, and you just ask him, which one he would want. And then I think once you find out the receiver he wants, you can kind of piecemeal like draft picks and throw-ins or whatever to get the value right. So I don't really have necessarily a great feeling here on this. I'm not really a big-time Jamison Williams guy or George Pickens guy coming into 2024, and those look to be incorrect takes right now. Lamb is a stud. I think Harrison's going to be a stud. I was a huge Godwin fan coming into this season. And so I don't really know if there's one that stands out to me as really good value for Stevenson. Herms, I think this is a case where you got to go to the owner and see what they want to do.
Yeah, I think it's probably best to approach it that way, but I definitely agree with you in the two that you've identified as the ones that I would be probably most, willing to give up in exchange in Jameson Williams and George Pickens. Because I mean, what more can you say about CeeDee Lamb? What more can you say about Chris Godwin? Marvin Harrison Jr., like we've seen a kind of Jekyll and Hyde from the,
Yeah.
Arizona Cardinals offense. But like, I think it's probably going to be closer to the higher end stuff for Harrison every week. But like, yeah, even as a Steelers fan, like, I love George Pickens, but like, look, let's be real, dude. Like, this passing offense is weird. This entire offense is weird. If anyone is down to take on George Pickens and you get a really good running back in return, like, I would just do that. I would completely do that.
Scott Hoyt, if Joe Mixon is indeed out, is Akers a decent running back 3? I'm trying to find the latest on Mixon today. I don't believe he practiced, Herms. Have you seen any practice reports today on Joe Mixon?
I have not personally, no,
I
but
got it. Okay, so DJ Ben Aim, Bien Amy. I'm butchering your name. I'm sorry. He was not spotted at Thursday's practice, and neither was Damian Pierce as well. So if that's the case, is Cam Akers a decent running back 3 this week in Minnesota? Decent, yeah. I think he's a decent running back 3. So in the FFPC where you have to start 2 flexes. I could get on board with Akers being one of those flexes if indeed Joe Mixon is out this week. That game for Houston is a 1 p.m. game, so you will know Sunday morning. How do you feel about Akers going up against the Vikings if he is the lead running back?
I mean, I have a certain amount of skepticism because most of what we've seen from Cam Akers, looking super good was in the preseason, but also there are so many injuries going on throughout the NFL. If that really is the best option to you, you could do a lot worse than the starting running back in the Houston Texans offense. Like that's a good offense. I think that would be a pretty sound move.
The question that we have coming in too from Bearded Hipster RL. This is a question he's got to figure out tonight. This is a good problem to have. Ramondre Stevenson, Drake London, Malik Neighbors, or Tony Pollard at the flex. I think all 4 of those guys are easily startable this week. I actually like Tony Pollard quite a bit this coming week against the Packers, who were giving up chunk plays to Jonathan Taylor, and then for whatever reason, Shane Steichen decides that he wasn't going to run him in the 4th quarter, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't see that mistake being made 2 weeks in a row by Brian Callahan in this case. So I like Pollard this week. I think Stevenson and London are great, as well as Neighbors. I think is just a stud. It stinks you can't play all these guys. I mean, I have certain teams where all 4 of these guys would be playing on my roster. I guess if I had to pick one, I would probably say Drake London, but man, Herms, I don't know.
In difficult situations,
And
like,
sorry,
yeah.
I screwed up. I thought this was bench one. It's not. If I have to pick one, it's hard for me to get away from Malik Neighbors. That's probably who I'm playing here. So I would rank them probably Neighbors, Stevenson, Pollard, London. That's probably how I'd have them.
I'm probably the same order, man. Because when it comes down to difficult choices like this, I think the best thing you can do is just bet on volume. And through 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure no wide receiver has a higher target share on his team than Malik Neighbors at 38.5%, like well over 50% of his team's air yards. Like the Giants' offense is weird. It's not the greatest, but he is the focus of it. It is
Yeah.
all Malik Neighbors. Fantasy football is a math game. That's really what it comes down to. And probability is a pretty big part of math, ain't it?
I think when you talk about a guy as talented as Neighbors is, the target share, as you pointed out, almost 40%. It's how do you sit a guy like that? Regardless of what your
Yeah.
other options are, it's really difficult to do so. Joe King, thoughts on Rams receiving weapons offense? Yeah, this is interesting because we found out this week. Adam Schefter reported that there are no plans currently for the Rams to place Cooper Kupp on injured reserve. Now, I would imagine that if they were going to do it, they're going to do it prior to this game because they want to get that first game out of the way. That hasn't happened yet. He's going to be wearing a cast for the next week or so, and this is already on a team that is without Puka Nacua. So now you have Kyron Williams on this squad, but you have Tyler Johnson and Jordan Winnington and Demarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell catching passes from the Rams. I think that if I had to pick this week which ones are startable, I think it's Robinson, and that's it. I mean, obviously Kyron Williams too, but that's it for me. You could make a case maybe Colby Parkinson and tight end premium. Rest of these guys I'm staying away from, Herms, and there's a non-zero chance that the Rams offense just falls apart and just cannot move the ball without Kupp and Nacua.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously losing Kupp and Nacua is huge, but the biggest injuries are to the offensive line because Joe Noteboom, offensive tackle, he's going to be out. Steve Avila going to be out. Jonah Jackson out. That's 3 of your 5 starting offensive linemen for Los Angeles. So as much interest as there is in some of these pass catchers, like a Demarcus Robinson, like a Tyler Johnson, I'm unsure if the proverbial winner of this injury sweepstakes is even going to do a whole heck of a lot if Matthew Stafford doesn't have time to deliver the ball to anybody. So like that would be my biggest takeaway from this is like, yeah, you can play your hand at trying to figure out which guy is going to be the most effective, but I'm just not sure the ecosystem's healthy enough for anybody to have a particularly high scoring ceiling.
The next question regarding the Demarcus Robinson here. Scott Colby does not have A.J. Brown this week, or we think he will not have A.J. Brown this week. He's been doubtful. He hasn't been practicing. I'm sure he's going to be out. So then does he start Demarcus Robinson this week against the Niners, or does he go with Cortland Sutton at Tampa? I actually lean towards Robinson over Sutton here, Herms.
I completely agree. Cortland Sutton has been very disappointing. He leads his team in target share over 20% and has converted that into 0.7 fantasy points per touch. It's pretty awful. Sutton is somebody that like I drafted in a couple places thinking like, well, someone has to catch the ball in Denver, and it turns out that doesn't matter. So regardless of everything I just said about the Rams situation, I would rather deal with the chances of that than deal with anybody in Denver. So yeah, Demarcus Robinson would also be my pick.
Update here on something we talked about earlier. Field Yates from ESPN reporting that Kenneth Walker did indeed not practice today, so it looks like it is going to be another Charbonnet game for him this week. Scott Hoyt points out, we're not nervous about the San Francisco defense with Demarcus Robinson. I feel like that factors into my decision, but ultimately, I still feel like Robinson outscores Sutton this week, even with the bad defensive matchup.
Yeah, like the Broncos are worse than the 49ers are good. So that's going to be my rationale, and I'm sticking to it.
Christian Kirk or Ezekiel Elliott this week. This is another good one too. Kirk Now, I don't think he got hurt last week, but I think he only got like one target, Herms, right? It was kind of a
Mhm.
bizarre thing. You'd think that without Evan Engram in there, Kirk would go wild, and he didn't. 3 targets, he caught one for -1 yard, so a 0.9 point performance this past week. He did have a touchdown in that game, did Kirk, but it was called back due to a penalty. Elliott's kind of, it's not like he owns that backfield right now in Dallas, and it's tough to figure out, you know, what they want to do based on the debacle that took place against the Saints this past week. But Ezekiel Elliott had one fewer carry than Rico Dowdle. He also had 2 fewer catches. This seems like that this is a clear backfield share right now. And Christian Kirk, if Evan Engram can't go, I mean, this should be a good bounce back week for him. I know it stinks what happened to Kirk last week. I'm going to roll with him over Elliott.
Oh, I wish I could, man. I think I've just been so burned personally, especially in my home league by Christian Kirk, that like he's just kind of in my personal banishment into the shadow realm until I see something a little bit more. But like, yeah, I mean, it probably makes more sense than Zeke Elliott at this point. I think I just need to get over myself. It's not a very analytical answer, but because I've been so personally affected by Christian Kirk, it really hurts my feelings.
and as Scott points out too, we each had more receiving yardage than Christian Kirk did last week.
That's true.
So we're nothing if we're not productive, Herms. We are nothing if we're not productive. I want to step out and take our first break. When we come back, we got Thursday Night Football starting up in about 45 minutes here or so, maybe about 40 minutes, and we're going to help you get those lineups set. We're going to talk about the defenses. We're going to talk about whether Breece Hall is in an RBBC right now, that and whether Antonio Gibson might make for a decent flex tonight. He's CH Herms. You know him from Fantasy Points, from Optimus Fantasy, and of course the 33rd team. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. This is your pregame tonight, heading in to Thursday Night Football. It's the high stakes fantasy football show on the Better Sports Network.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl.
And
when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But
yeah.
Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game.
Yeah.
That they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman, and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky,
no way,
is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yard go.
20 minutes until the top of the hour here. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, taking you in to Thursday Night Football between the New England Patriots and the New York Jets. I'm joined by Herms, CH Herms from Fantasy Points, the 33rd team, and of course, Optimus Fantasy. Follow him on the X at CH_Herms. Interesting point that I heard today. First time in 13 years, Herms, that the Jets are actually a favorite against the Patriots.
That's incredible. Good for them. See, perseverance. If you just stick to it, it will pay off.
You can persevere and go to myffpc.com, play the FFPC Weekly Challenge there. Enter for as little as $35, win up to $2,500. No draft, no salary cap. You just pick whatever players you want. Only one player per team. Go to myffpc.com to play in that right now. That's myffpc.com. We're helping you get your lineup set tonight before our Thursday Night Football preview between New England and New York. Scott Hoyt got a tough lineup decision in one of my home leagues, Godwin or Metcalf. This is tough because I think Metcalf was drafted in front of Godwin in most leagues. However, I'm going to go with Godwin here. And this is like, I don't believe in the whole ride or die concept with a player that you have to leave your draft with. But man, I drafted a bunch of Godwin. I was trying to get him on all my teams this year. Through 2 weeks, it's been pretty pure. It's been pretty awesome. And I'm going to roll with Godwin over Metcalf. Metcalf is dealing with a hand injury right now. I'm trying to find the practice report to see if he practiced today. But yeah, I mean, with the big Smith and Jigba game last week, you still got Lockett there. Charbonnet is going to be a threat out of the backfield. And you look at how inefficient that Buccaneers running game has been. Godwin's been a huge meal ticket for Tampa so far. I'm starting him over Metcalf.
1,000%. For all the same reasons, I have Chris Godwin ranked within my top 12 at receiver this week, and DK Metcalf just a little bit outside. So just plain and simple rankings debate, Godwin wins.
Godwin does indeed win that rankings debate. Okay, tonight, Patriots and Jets, that game is going to get underway here shortly. We are looking at an 8:15 kickoff, so we're about just over a half hour away here. There's not one of the things about tonight's game, Herms, is, and the total on this is 39, so you don't think it's going to be a lot of fireworks between these two teams who, quite frankly, have pretty good defenses. I don't know how much fantasy juice we can squeeze out of it, and if no is the answer to a lot of these, that's okay. Antonio Gibson, let's start off with him in that Patriots backfield this past week. When you look at what he was able to do against the Seattle Seahawks, it wasn't a ton. He did only caught one pass, but on the ground, he actually was their leading rusher, but he got half the carries that Ramondre Stevenson did. He did have a 45-yard run. If you take that away, he still had 10 carries for 51 yards. Is he a flex tonight against the Jets, knowing that the Jets defense has not been capital letters Jets defense yet this year, as they gave up a pretty good game to both Tony Pollard last week on the ground. Your thoughts here on whether Gibson might be flex worthy this week?
He's going to be interesting. I mean, and to your point about the Jets defense, they rank 26th in run defense DVOA through 2 weeks this season. It's definitely a softer matchup. And Gibson, on a short week, potentially might have a little bit more of an opportunity to work into it because, it's a short week. Maybe you want to, rest Ramondre just a little bit more. But the difficult thing he has going for him, despite how well he performed last week, is that he's only appeared on 22.5% of the Patriots' offensive snaps and has barely over 25% of the opportunity share. So we're talking about, the carries and, getting the ball through the air as a receiver. It's just not enough volume to really count on yet. I think Gibson is an interesting player to continue to stash on your bench, see if this continues to grow. But for what we have right now from a volume perspective, it's unreliable.
It is unreliable, and I hope the big plays continue. I do have Gibson on a few teams, and if Stevenson were to go down, then Gibson probably becomes a top, borderline top 20 play for running backs that week. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. Don't cut him, but he's probably not a start tonight. Brandon, this is Juan Garcia on YouTube. Brandon Ayuk, Marvin Harrison Jr., Ramondre Stevenson, J.K. Dobbins. He basically has to start to. Oh, Smitty is the first one. I'm assuming Devonta Smith. Is that who that
I
was?
assume so, yeah.
Okay, so he's basically got to bench one of these guys. Devonta Smith, Brandon Ayuk, Harrison, Stevenson, and Dobbins. Mother of God. Okay. I think without A.J. Brown, I have to play Smith. No Deebo Samuel. Ayuk really has to step up, and potentially no George Kittle this week too.
Yeah.
So it could be a target funnel for Brandon Ayuk. So he's probably in. So those are the two receivers. He's got to pick one running back. I like Stevenson over Dobbins, and then it comes down to Harrison or Dobbins. Yeah, I think it's Harrison as the flex. So who am I benching here? I'm benching Dobbins. What do you think, Herms?
I think that's probably fair. I mean, Dobbins, for as much as he has been electric, he is receiving nearly identical touches to his backfield teammate, Gus Edwards. Like, yeah, Gus isn't doing a lot with those touches by comparison, but it is very much of a split. And in those types of situations, I've used this as an example for, the rationale behind some of these decisions so far in this show. But, fantasy football is a math game. And the tiebreaker sometimes is who's going to touch the ball a little bit more. That might be Stevenson. So I agree with your analysis on this one.
Let's move on and talk about the Patriots wide receivers, as depressing as this is. Jalen Polk last week, 2 catches, 12 yards, and a touchdown. KJ Osborne, 1 catch, 7 yards. Demario Douglas, nothing. And then you see the running backs and Hunter Henry getting involved as the main heavy lifters in the passing game. Are any of the Patriots wide receivers startable tonight against the Jets? No, thank you, is my opinion.
Yeah, none of them are really getting the ball enough for us to count on it. The only one that I would say, like, if you have to, my answer is Jalen Polk, because so far he has done the most with the opportunities that he has been given. But even then, that's still lesser than KJ Osborne, all this other jazz, blah, blah, blah. The answer is really none of them.
Right. How bullish are you on Jalen Polk this season in general? I mean, is there a point where maybe Drake May takes over and you think that they develop something? Is he worth rostering, quite frankly, in a 12-team, 20-man roster, 12-team league, 20-man roster? Is he worth rostering at this point? Because that's what the FFPC has. I mean, I think you could make a case for cutting the guy at this point.
It really depends a lot on circumstances. I mean, he's the type of guy that you have, quote unquote, at the end of your bench anyway. So, I mean, how healthy is your team? I think that's going to determine a lot for you. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I would keep Polk if I could, but
Yeah.
it's definitely one of those things where, like, if it comes down to brass tacks and you got to get rid of a guy, we're going to have to wait until Drake May takes over for a lot of this to pay off anyway. And do we know when that's going to be right now?
No, we really don't. I did pick up Polk in a couple of dynasty leagues where he got cut. I'm willing to stash him there and see what happens. But again, keep in mind, until we know what Drake May is, we know what the Patriots offense is, and it's not great as far as wide receiver friendly. Let's do Hunter Henry here. Is he a must start in FFPC tight end premium leagues? Herms, it's difficult for me to get away from a guy, and we talked about this earlier, who had that many targets, who was so involved in the offense, and quite frankly, carried that passing offense the majority of the game against Seattle, to say, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to sit him this week. I don't think I can do that in tight end premium. I'm rolling him out there against the Jets tonight.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. Like, tight end is a bit of a wasteland. And at this point, you chase where the ball's going. And if the ball's going to Hunter Henry that much, then you just stick with it.
The Jets running back situation is evolving. And I don't think I'm out of line by bringing this up. Is Braylon Allen making the Jets running back situation into a committee? bear in mind, Braylon Allen last week had half as many carries as Hall, 14-7. He gets into the end zone on one of those. Braylon Allen also catches 2 balls for 23 yards and a touchdown as well. So he gets into the end zone twice. Breece Hall did score. He did catch a touchdown in that game as well. 7 catches, 52 yards. He had 62 yards on the ground. And it's fair to wonder if Braylon Allen was just coming in for mop-up duty. Man, would this have been an absolute boffo game for Breece Hall? So is there a committee there? Is there a willingness from Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett to keep Breece Hall fresh throughout the season? And this is what we're going to see. Breece Hall, 21 touches, Braylon Allen, 9. Is that the ratio that we should get used to?
I'm not entirely certain yet if that's how it's going to shake out, but I think the early evidence suggests to us that Braylon Allen could perform if he was given that opportunity again. He's also a prospect that I was very interested in, coming into the league, starting as a freshman at Wisconsin at 17 years old and dominating against Big Ten defenses. Like, he's good. He's definitely capable of doing a lot of different things. And yes, I was talking earlier, it's a little difficult to, count on 2 touchdowns or whatever, but, almost 60 scrimmage yards is nothing to scoff at. In a part-time role, if you can get somewhere around, 60 scrimmage yards from you, like, that's a decent player. I'm not ready to go that far yet, but Braylon Allen is definitely in must roster territory in case this continues to grow, or worst case scenario, look at what's going on with people who didn't pick up Jordan Mason if they're the Christian McCaffrey owner. Like, it's possible that Braylon Allen could be one of those players if something happens to Breece Hall. So no matter how you slice it, there's reason for him to be on your team. Maybe not in the lineup, but he has to be on your team.
I picked him up in a redraft league where he was inexplicably cut. And, it just as, an injury way type guy, because here's the thing, what we know about Braylon Allen. If Hall were to miss time, they're going to ride Allen, and he looks the part right now for sure. Dom Gazzetti in the chat. I have Hall, and that's Breece for me, Balky. It probably is Breece for me that I'm calling. But remember, I'm a Wisconsin guy, so I'm going to praise my Badgers as much as I can. So there you go with Braylon Allen. Don't start him. Keep him on your roster. Breece Hall, fire him up. Z Smitty, should I start Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, Derek Carr, or Geno Smith? Mother of God, that is way too many quarterbacks to have on your team. I have Love, but he might not play. And the others, the others on the waiver. I misread. Sorry, Smitty. I misread that. I definitely like Carr and Goff. Actually, I like all those guys over Rodgers. I like Rodgers over Love just because gun to my head, I don't think Love plays this week. So then I would have to be playing Rodgers tonight. I don't think you have to, though. Carr is like quarterback 2 right now, which is insane. How well he's been doing, and maybe that it turns midnight on the Saints and Derek Carr this week. Anything's possible, but it kind of depends who you have to cut. If it were up to me, I would be playing Goff out of those choices this week. Goff, who is going up against the Arizona Cardinals. I forgot I was going to look up the total on that game before. I bet it's a high one. So that's what I would be going with. I would not count on Jordan Love. You wouldn't have to, because you could wait around to play Jared Goff. Total in that game is 51.5. He's my favorite here. The signal caller from Detroit.
Yeah, Love's not playing. I would be very surprised if Jordan Love plays. Like, I'm eliminating that option right off the bat. As far as the rest of them go, like, Goff is definitely probably the safest option, but right now, dude, shout out Clint Kubiak. Shout out the New Orleans Saints offense. It's working, dude. Carr currently ranks first in EPA per dropback. It's working. He's getting that ball to Rashid Shaheed. He's getting that ball, fed to Alvin Kamara to help, kind of salt away those victories. Like, I have a hard time turning away from the hot hand, even though it's going to be a slightly, more difficult defense that they're going to be facing this week for the first time. So, like, yeah, dude, just shout out Derek Carr. I'm going to keep it going until the wheels fall off.
He'd have to cut Alec Pierce to pick up Goff. And I guess if Jordan Love is your only quarterback, I would be willing to pick up Goff and cut Pierce in that league. I just think in today's NFL playing fantasy football, I think you do need to keep 2 quarterbacks rostered because I've seen them dry up before with quarterback injuries before. So I think you're better off going with Goff here or Derek Carr. I definitely, I think you can make the case for Derek Carr the way things have been humming down there. It's just what they have done the first 2 weeks have been phenomenal. And maybe more of it is in store down the road. Scott Hoyt, Geno Smith, or Sam Darnold this week. If you can only play one, Geno Smith at home against the Dolphins, and Sam Darnold is taking on the Houston Texans, which is a home game for Darnold. I would lean towards Geno Smith here. Justin Jefferson's dealing with something right now. I don't think Addison plays. We obviously know there's no Hawkinson this week. I like the weapons better for Smith. Slight lean to Smith here for me.
I got them both ranked fairly similarly this week, but I have Geno Smith rounding out what I call my quote unquote green zone of quarterbacks that I feel you can count on, which is it's not the same size group every single week, but for week 3, I have it as the top 15. Geno Smith belongs into that top 15 for me. So just by virtue of that exercise, I go with Geno Smith.
Yeah. Smitty's showing us his bench. Yeah. If that's your entire bench, then I think it's a shallow bench. So I would be cutting Pierce and then picking up either Goff or Carr, whichever one you want. Pick your flavor. Allen Lazard or Mike Williams. Yes, we're talking about that tonight. To me, neither one of these guys is startable, but if you have to, maybe you're dealing. I have one league, Herms, one dynasty league, where I just added Jalen Tolbert today, but prior to that, 6 receivers on this team. 4 of them were Deebo Samuel, Keenan Allen, Puka Nacua, and A.J. Brown. Really unfortunate situation. So you don't want to be there, but if you are, maybe you are looking at Lazard. Maybe you are looking at Mike Williams. I don't think Mike Williams is up to speed yet. I don't know if he'll get the full complement of snaps. So if you have to, if you're forced to start a Jets receiver tonight, name Garrett Wilson, I think it's Lazard.
I completely agree. Mike Williams so far has seen 1 target. Only one. For as unreliable as somebody like Allen Lazard might be, who took a significant step back last week after, kind of opening the season with, I think he found the end zone once or twice in week 1. He's still just seeing the ball more. Mike Williams is going to be somebody that might pay off down the line as he gets healthier, but that time is not now.
We got an interesting trade question on YouTube right now. Which side of this trade would you rather have for Cole Bowman? Jaden Daniels and Chris Godwin, or Jalen Hurts and Chris Olave? This is half-point PPR. I think this is interesting. I think you can make the case that you are actually upgrading at the quarterback and the receiver position, even though the stats may not show it right now. Give me the Hurts Olave side of this. As much as I like Godwin, I'd rather have that side than Daniels and Godwin.
Yeah, I mean, at least as far as the quarterback part of it goes, I mean, you're ending up on a pretty good side of it because I am a huge proponent of trusting quarterbacks who run the football. So you're definitely going to be happy no matter how that goes. But we talked a little bit about how much we both really like Chris Godwin, but Chris Olave is going to have to come around eventually. He still has a 21.1% target share in the offense, even though he's only seen 8 PPR points per game so far this year. It's because of something I alluded to a little bit earlier, in that the Saints have been so dominant that they get up so high that the lead is insurmountable for their opponent, and they salt away the victories with Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams running the ball. So, as these games get closer, you're not going to have to get in all of your receiving work in the first half before it becomes a blowout, and that's going to eventually be a boon for Chris Olave. At that point, I mean, I can definitely see the Hurts and Olave side being a little bit more valuable. As much as we both like Chris Godwin, I think that's probably the better end of the deal.
Well, is Chris Godwin punching above his weight right now? Because I think we're both in agreement that Olave, the breakout is not the breakout, but the production is coming. Like, it's going to come. You can't have underlying metrics like this and just keep up what he's been doing. And I think his week 2 was actually not that bad. So a couple more YouTube questions here. The Joker, Jets defense or Bears defense? I think both these are fine starts this week. I'm going to roll with the Jets tonight against Jacoby Brissett and the Patriots.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Okay. Moving forward, Brock Purdy or Baker Mayfield. This is a tough one this week because I like both these quarterbacks. I'm actually playing both of them in a couple of different leagues. I would be rolling with Purdy, but this is close, Herms.
I'm the type of guy where I ride with things until the wheels fall off. I believe in this Buccaneers offense. I like what Liam Cohen's doing. And kind of like you were mentioning before, like because their run game is a bit of a mess, we're not really sure what's happening with the split between Rashad White and Bucky Irving. It does kind of have to be both figuratively and literally on Baker Mayfield's
Right.
shoulder. So I would trust that. That and also we don't know how healthy these receivers are going to be for the 49ers. Purdy is a little bit risky because he might be without Samuel and Kittle.
You changed my mind. I'm going with Mayfield. You're right. I'm going with Evans. I'm going with Godwin. I'm going to go with Mayfield. It could just be the Ayuk show and Jawan Jennings or something like that. So, yeah, I think Mayfield's the play here. Tonight, Ben Moore has to make a decision, Ramondre Stevenson or Josh Jacobs, full PPR. In this, regardless of format, I know Jacobs is dealing with something this week. Matt LaFleur kind of said, it's not a big deal with this back issue. I think that's something they just put on the injury report because he had 30-plus carries against the Colts. Give him a veteran day, and I think he's going to be just fine against the Titans this week. I'm gonna stick around and wait for Josh Jacobs. Not concerned about him missing. I'm playing him over Stevenson tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the Packers are running the crap out of the ball, and Josh Jacobs got paid a lot of money for that exact reason. So as long as Malik Willis is under center, the only thing they really can do is just run the ball with Josh Jacobs.
Right. Yep. Exactly. This is, in my opinion, too much. T-Money is giving up too much in this trade. Patrick Mahomes, Calvin Ridley, and Drake London in exchange for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Number one, I think you're buying way too low on Burrow and well, I mean, buying low is a good thing, but when you can, I think you're still paying too much here. I think you're paying too much when you should be paying lesser price for both Chase and Burrow. Now, this could be the last week that you could get them because I think they both have big games this week and their price is going to shoot up. But to give up Mahomes, Ridley, and London, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand pat with what I got.
Yeah, and also just based off of what's on the bench, like the fact that Ridley is your first guy up off the bench, like that's important, dude. With the way that offense has been working out, in Tennessee, like Ridley is kind of the only thing that's working there, at least in terms of the pass catchers. Like Tony Pollard has been wonderful as a runner, but that's a completely different facet of the game. But yeah, I mean, sacrificing your depth to, take on a stack like that just does not really seem worth it to me at this point.
What's wrong with Tyler Conklin, Herms, as we get back to our Thursday night preview? This is a guy that I had high hopes for, and it hasn't come together in the first two games. Now, everybody likes to say, oh, Aaron Rodgers loves to throw to the tight end. Well, I don't know if that's historically the case because, number one, he's only had one really good one in his career in Green Bay, and that was Jermichael Finley, and then Finley got hurt, and then he pumped the ball into Robert Tonyan 3 years ago, I think that was. Tonyan did all right, but it was so touchdown dependent was the performance. So I don't necessarily know if Rodgers really loves throwing to the tight ends all that much. And maybe this is just a case where either A, Rodgers would rather throw to his receivers that he knows, or B, the Jets passing offense just isn't that good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit more toward the latter. I just don't think that the passing offense is going to be that great. They designed this team largely around the understanding that they were just going to be feeding it to Breece Hall a lot. That was, kind of the impetus for, raising the quality of the offensive line this offseason. Because, for as bad as everything was in 2023 for the Jets, the one thing that kind of worked, at least a little bit, was running the football. And with Rodgers coming back from an Achilles, already being as old as he is, are we really trying to rely too much on an elderly quarterback anyway? Not really. So
Yeah.
Conklin, he's doing a great job being a real life NFL tight end because he's out there on over 90% of the snaps. But tight ends also block. I think that's really just the type of thing that he's going to be out there doing and making his money that way. Nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't help us for fantasy. And sometimes we have to be okay with that.
What about the defense? The last question I'll ask you is that we got kickoff in about 10 minutes or so. We already said we like the Jets defense as a good start tonight. What about the Patriots defense against this Jets offense that, granted, they have some playmakers, but it's not like they've been putting up 30 points a game.
I mean, I think the Patriots are a unit that, like, if you're in a bit of a pinch, you could go for it. But I just think that, like, the the Jets are going to be able to find a way to run the ball enough that it's going to render the Patriots kind of useless for fantasy purposes. But there are worse choices for certain.
There are worse choices. I am staying away from the Patriots. In fact, I had them on a couple of leagues, dropped them in favor of, I think, trying to think who I got. I think Tampa I got in a good amount of spots. So I'm excited to start them against Denver this week. And then Vegas I got in at least 2 leagues who go against the Carolina Panthers. So we'll see what happens there. But I like both those defenses. Definitely better than the New England Patriots tonight. They're getting ready for kickoff. We're getting ready for the second hour of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. He's CH Herms from Fantasy Points, the 33rd team, and of course, Optimus Fantasy. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. When we come back, Herms and I are going to build an FFPC Weekly Challenge lineup. If you want to enter it, go right ahead. Herms might enter it too. You never know as we take our shot at a $2,500 prize. You are watching the Better Sports Network.
McMillan is this year's Puka Nacua. He's everything you want in Roma Dunze at half the price. Now, this could be true, but we have the opportunity of more than just a few characters. We can go deep in this. Why is Jalen McMillan, and in what sense is Jalen McMillan this year's Puka Nacua?
Listen, Washington, they had some stud wide receivers, Adunze, McMillan, Jalen Polk that no one's talking about right now. And somehow McMillan has been completely overshadowed because of what his teammates were able to accomplish. As for slot receivers, he's right up there. He's one of the smoothest operators out there. But people forget that before his injury last season, in those first 3 games, he was right up there with Adunze as far as yards and touchdowns were concerned in those first 3 games. The season prior, he had more receptions. As a sophomore, more yards and higher yards per route run. Praise Odunze all you want. Yeah, you should. He deserves the praise. But McMillan is going to be a great offer later on in these drafts. I'm getting those Puka Nacua type vibes out of him. And when I say Puka Nacua, he's going to be this year's Puka Nacua. It's not like he's going to go out there and put up 1,500 yards and be an all-pro. No, I'm talking about exactly what is going on here when the people are getting negative about this comment. You're already looking down on McMillan. And not one damn person out there, and I'll say this right now, no one had Puka Nacua as the wide receiver run in the rookie class last season. I guarantee you. Why do I guarantee you? Because I got him at 408 in a draft. That's where I'm going with this. Jalen McMillan is a guy that you're getting at the end of the 3rd round or in the 4th round of your rookie drafts that is going to give you production. He's going to be one of those wide receivers. You're like, oh, crap. All right, excellent.
We're telling ourselves happy stories about players we want to pick, less happy stories about players we don't want to pick. And part of that is being ready to abandon our own carefully crafted narratives when it's time to abandon them, right? Like, bail, this was not working, So like we come in with super hard opinions and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. The better fantasy players are the people who acknowledge quickly that, hey, this isn't working out. Doesn't mean you have to abandon a player, but it means you have to abandon the approach and maybe you have to go with a different player. I mean, if people were playing Stephon Diggs last year down the stretch, they were only playing him because his name is Stephon Diggs. You have to be ready to acknowledge, hey, this guy's not getting the job done. I did it. Bloom and I had a big discussion about this last December, and I'm saying you can't play him right now, right? And I know that's a hard decision to make because why? FOMO. We're going to miss out on that big game. The minute I sit this guy down, he's going to have the big game. Well, maybe. But also, while he is not having great games, there are other guys on your roster having great games. And I think that's to me, the hardest thing about fantasy is like, when do I divorce myself from my narrative? When do I tell when do I acknowledge my happy story is not coming true? I need to figure something else out. And the people who are good at that are the people who are good at fantasy football.
9 minutes past the top of the hour, you're watching the Better Sports Network. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm your host, Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and he is CH Herms from Fantasy Points from the 33rd team, and of course, the host of the Herms. Is it the Herms and Nate show on Optimus Fantasy? Is that what we're looking at?
That's how I like to think of it personally, but the name of it is the Nate and Herm show. I mean, it really, you can order it just based off of who's your favorite. It's
Right.
really up to you.
And Nate was actually on. He hopped on. God, what was it, like 2 weeks or so ago? So we're getting plenty of the Optimus guys on the show, which has been awesome. I'll tell you what else is awesome. Playing in the FFPC Weekly Challenge, no draft or salary cap, $35 or $200 to enter. You can win up to $2,500. 10-team, 30-team, and 100-team contests over at myffpc.com. Now, I'm not eligible to play in this because I'm an employee of the FFPC. However, Herms and I are going to put together a lineup. And when you watch this lineup being put together tonight, you can choose to enter it yourself, and maybe you can win big cash. You never know. Herms, when you put together a lineup like this, where we don't have to worry about drafting, we don't have to worry about staying under a salary cap, we can pick whoever we want, but we can only pick one player per team. How do you normally like to start this? Do you like to look at, okay, what game is the highest total? Who has the best matchup? What player am I really in love with that is going to get a ton of volume? What's the proper way to start building something like this?
I think you got to mix in a little bit of each of those things, but with a good foundation to set is probably at like quarterback and tight end, trying to think about guys who belong to teams where, oh, that guy's definitely the only player on this team that I care about. Because the last thing you really want to do is pick, let's say, Jalen Hurts from the Eagles, for example, and then, come back around and be like, rats, I really wish I could throw Devontae Smith into this lineup, but I've already picked an Eagle. Pick at some of those onesie positions, guys who are the best representatives from their team, and that's it. So that way you have a little bit more variety from some of these very high scoring offenses at running back and receiver.
Okay, so does that mean, if we're going to do that and we're looking at the onesie positions, does that mean we have to have Brock Bowers as a representative on our team this week?
I mean, come on, dude. The early results are in, and this kid is a superstar. He's seeing so many targets. He is seeing so many opportunities. And frankly, the Raiders are more of a pass-heavy attack than I thought they would be. So just like every possible ingredient that could be going into the delicious Brock Bowers soup has been cooking, and it tastes fantastic.
All right, so we're going to add Brock Bowers on this team from the Las Vegas Raiders as our tight end. Remember, the one we're going to do tonight, we're going to do without kickers and defenses. We're going to formulate a team with 10 players that is going to feature a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and then 4 flexes. So we still have the opportunity to add more tight ends if we want to do so. Now, Bowers, I think another thing working in his favor is the running game there hasn't been all that great. It's been Adams, it's been Bowers. And if we can get a guy who is the tight end 1 in FFPC leagues so far this year, we're going to roll with them. So we get him there. Jason Allwine from Player Profiler did this exercise with me last week, and I think he took an interesting approach. So many people, and not interesting, I think it's, well, let me explain. A lot of people in season-long fantasy football, full PPR leagues, they will load up on receivers early, and they will try to fill in the cracks with running backs. Why is that? Well, in part because running back is a very difficult position to stay healthy all season. But this is a 1-week season. This is we just need these guys to stay healthy. So I think we can load up on running backs. Now, not necessarily load up on them, but I think we can get the bell cows on our team. I'm going to stay away from Breece Hall. I don't know how you feel about this, Herms. But like Breece Hall, after what I saw with Braylon Allen and how involved he was, I think there's better ways to do it at running back this week. Do you have any favorite running backs that you're looking at if we take Hall out of the equation tonight? And quite frankly, let's just take all Jets and Patriots out of the equation tonight since they kick off in less than a minute.
Yeah, probably good to avoid that. I think probably my favorite one that also just stands out as one of the most impressive draft day values already through 2 weeks this season is Brian Robinson Jr. from the Commanders. Now, with passing kind of being a little bit down across the league, there are a lot of running backs who have been, looking pretty good. But the interesting thing in Brian Robinson's favor is that he currently occupies a 72.7% opportunity share of those backfield touches. Austin Eckler is on the field in plenty of situations, but the ball's not necessarily going into his hands. The volume is heading toward Brian Robinson. And I think just based off of that type of, kind of situation alone, it bodes well for him against a Cincinnati Bengals defense in week 3. And because Jaden Daniels has not really been able to get the ball through the air going very much yet. So, like, it's kind of the only dimension of their offense that's working. They need Brian Robinson to be good to win, and I kind of expect him to be able to deliver.
I think putting Brian Robinson on this team is a good idea because when it comes down to who you like on Washington, it's to me it's Robinson, it's McLaurin, it's Ertz, and it's Daniels. Well, Ertz and McLaurin are kind of dependent upon Daniels, right? And Daniels still has yet to throw a touchdown. Hasn't thrown a pick yet, but he has yet to throw a touchdown too. So I think we can avoid the Commanders' passing game, and Robinson is definitely an interesting one. This is one of the Monday night games this week too, when the Commanders take on the Bengals. In this game, it is the Bengals who are a 7.5-point favorite, so maybe a negative game script, but you do have to be different somewhere. And I think you made the argument pretty solid on if the Commanders are to win this game, it's going to be on the legs of Brian Robinson. So we'll include him. So we have a running back, we have a tight end. Which position would you like to attack next? Is there another team out there that you feel like, okay, let's grab the one guy off this team? I think about San Francisco. I think about Jordan Mason. I think about Brandon Ayuk off that team. If they win that game, it's going to be due to those guys. Do you like either one of those, given that we're not taking Kittle, we're probably not taking Purdy, and obviously Deebo Samuel off the table? How do you attack the Niners? Is that a team we should be attacking for this?
Absolutely. And Jordan Mason is by far the perfect candidate for this. The Rams defense entering this year already kind of had some challenges with the fact that Aaron Donald decided to retire. Now they're also facing some injuries. I think their safety, John Johnson, might not be able to suit up this week. It's going to be a little bit difficult for them. But yeah, I mean, Jordan Mason has shown through these first couple of weeks he can handle well over 20 touches a game and just be that workhorse. And that's the type of stuff that we look for in fantasy. I think I said it before, but I'll say it again. Like, this is a math game. We had to just go based off of odds and probabilities. And one of the best ways you can do that is just a guy who's going to touch the ball maybe 20 times. And that man's name is Jordan Mason.
We do not have a receiver on our squad yet. What about Philadelphia with no A.J. Brown? We could go the Barkley route. We could go the Devonta Smith route. I don't think Goddard is a winning scenario here. We could also go the Jalen Hurts route if you thought that was an important one to do. The Eagles this week are in New Orleans, taking on the red hot New Orleans Saints. The total on that game, which kicks off at 1 p.m., is 49.5. We don't have any Saints. Maybe we can look at the Saints next. But what about this game specifically for the Eagles? Is there anybody that would be a good candidate for this roster?
I mean, Devonta Smith is definitely interesting because, like, not only would he perhaps have the benefit of, not having A.J. Brown potentially again this coming week, but he's also running a decent amount of slot snaps in a Kellen Moore offense, which is a pretty awesome role to be able to secure. Because if we remember correctly from his years with the Dallas Cowboys, that player that would mix in part-time in the slot and part-time, lining up elsewhere and out wide was a guy like CeeDee Lamb. Remember him? That guy? He's pretty good. So Devonta Smith is kind of playing a little bit of that role, not identically, but like a little bit of it. And I'm just willing to count on that in what should be a fairly high-scoring affair.
Okay, so we got Smith. We have our Eagle. The Saints are crushing it for points this week or this year so far. We got to get somebody on that team, on this squad. Is Chris Olave the pivot? Do we go with Rashid Shaheed, who's leading the team in receiving yards? Or do we load up and get a third running back in Alvin Kamara?
I think we take Alvin Kamara. Dude, look, straight up, like, no fancy statistical analysis for this one. Alvin Kamara is probably my favorite player in the NFL. He's just so good. He's just so dang good. And as long as they're able to, keep this train going, he does a lot of damage, not just on the ground, but he's also one of the most dangerous pass catchers out of the backfield in the
Mhm.
NFL. So just on vibes alone, we have to go with Alvin Kamara.
So Kamara is the third running back we have joining Brian Robinson, Jordan Mason in our backfield. Our team is half full. We have both our running backs. We have our tight end. We have one of our receivers and one of our flexes so far. So we have a quarterback, a receiver, and 3 flexes to go. Herms, I talked about this earlier in the program. The highest total on the board this week right now features the Detroit Lions and the Arizona Cardinals with their duel in the desert. Lions are 3-point road favorites in this game. We could come at this a few different ways. Obviously, we know Detroit's loaded for bear with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Jared Goff to a certain extent. Arizona, MHJ, Kyler Murray. You have James Conner on this team as well as Trey McBride. Who stands out here from, quite frankly, both these teams as we try to figure out not only how this game's going to go, but who the highest point scorers are going to be for it?
I think on the Lions side of the ball, we're not entirely certain what's going to come of Jamison Williams' impact in this offense. I know he's definitely been a bit of a surprise, but there was enough of a gap between his performance in week 1 and week 2 that it's a little bit ambiguous. Tight end Sam Laporta is seeing fewer first read targets than he did last year. The emphasis on getting him the ball isn't quite there. But what has stayed relatively constant has been the output of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think even with the evolution of this offense, now that they're adding a regular piece like Jamison Williams, who in prior years since entering the league has dealt with injuries, he had a suspension, etc. Amon-Ra remaining the constant is the impressive thing and kind of the big takeaway here. So he's the one that, at least from an odds perspective, I feel the safest about. So that would probably be where I would lean.
Amon-Ra St. Brown joins Devonta Smith on our team as our 2 wide receivers, which means we are down to 3 flexes and 1 quarterback. I do want to focus in before we leave this game, Herms, and get your thoughts. Now, if no Cardinal, reaches out and grabs you, that's fine, because we know McBride could go off. We know Harrison could go off. And quite frankly, James Conner's had a couple of nice games, as well as Kyler Murray, who is right up there in quarterback scoring. That can be problematic when you're trying to pick one of these guys, but I'll leave it to you. Should we grab a Cardinal? Should we not grab a Cardinal?
Man, I kind of want to, but I'm hesitating a little bit, because that's one of those, because there are a handful of them and they're all pretty dang good. It's going to be, I will say that if I was going to eliminate one, at least, it might be Marvin Harrison Jr., just because I believe a ton in the Cardinals ground game. They've been super effective, and James Conner just looks great right now. And Trey McBride is kind of just the player that a lot of this funnels through anyway. Kind of like I was saying before with Jamison Williams, the difference between the week 1 and the week 2 of Marvin Harrison Jr. is just like, well, which one's the real one?
Right.
For a competitive, tournament like this? I don't know if I want to bet on that level of ambiguity, but I don't know. I'm trying to save him, dude. I'm trying to save him. One of them might end up on our flex. It's a tough choice.
We could come back to it. That's fine. What about let's visit Dallas and take a look at Baltimore and the Cowboys here. A lot of options here. A lot of options at tight end for the Ravens alone, right? I think we want to stay away from the tight ends for Dallas because we're not totally sure what's going on with Ferguson and Schoenmaker. I don't like anybody in the backfield there. I think with Dallas, maybe it's just a chalk thing where if we go with CeeDee Lamb, great. If not, we skip the Cowboys. And then Baltimore too. There's Andrews. There is Lamar Jackson, who could be a quarterback for us. And then there's a guy I mentioned earlier in the program, 11 targets last week, in Zay Flowers. Anybody standing out to you in Big D when the Ravens come and visit?
Yeah, I've got Derrick Henry as one of my favorite running back starts this week. The game script has definitely impacted some of his touches so far this season. The reason that we didn't see more of him in week 1 is because the Ravens had to play catch up a little bit. That's the type of situation where you put in a change of pace pass catcher guy like Justice Hill. But then in week 2 against the Titans, or who did they play? I don't remember. But week 2, we saw a lot more of Derrick Henry because it was a more advantageous situation for them. And I think that that's going to be what happens this week, especially because the Cowboys, in doing my little bit of research, they have the second lowest run defense DVOA of any team so far in 2024. Very small sample size, but we have seen that teams can run all over the Dallas Cowboys, including Alvin Kamara, who we talked about a little bit before. So that would be where I would lean for that one.
So we got Derrick Henry joining our squad as the 4th running back there. Now, we have not talked about Kansas City visiting Atlanta. The Falcons, who are coming off that big Monday night victory over the Eagles, feature here's the thing. I'm gonna have a hard time choosing anybody on that team but Robinson. Like that, that's the guy that stands out to me. Kansas City, on the other hand, no Hollywood Brown, obviously, again this week. You have Travis Kelce, who's starting off slow. Xavier Worthy was awesome in week 1, less than awesome in week 2. You do have Rashee Rice, who has been, I'd say he's been pretty consistent, although he did not get the catches in week 2 that he got in week 1. Is there anything to attack in this game? Do we simply put Robinson on our roster and move on, or do we want to skip him and just see what else we can do?
Bijan is on the short list for sure, but I think I would probably skip for now and explore some other options.
Okay, let's move on to Jacksonville and Buffalo. Travis Etienne. Obviously, we're counting on no Evan Engram there this week. And then it's Christian Kirk, it's Brian Thomas. For Buffalo, it's Kincaid and James Cook. And then obviously Josh Allen is going to be a highly owned player, but highly owned for good reason too, Herms.
Yeah, Josh Allen is that dude for sure. And also, shout out James Cook for being able to put together, I think the highlight people took away from, last Thursday's game was like, oh, he got in the end zone like 3 times. That was crazy. Like, oh my God. It's cool. Don't get me wrong. But the most important thing is that he is seeing nearly 75% of the touches in Buffalo's backfield so far, which is a slight increase even beyond what he had last year. Like, I think somebody like a rookie Ray Davis is going to end up putting a dent in it at some point this season, because riding a guy like James Cook, who, measured in at the NFL Combine below 200 pounds, he's a bit of a smaller dude, not the type of person you want to hand the ball to like 25 times a week or something, but he's been showing the signs that he's capable of doing it. He's definitely on that short list for sure, but I'm just like, it's a weird matchup because, let's say for all intents and purposes, the Jaguars offense does finally click and this ends up being a bit of a shootout, then oh crap, we didn't expose ourselves to enough Jaguars players. I just don't have a good enough read on this game.
Okay, that's fine. But there's plenty other ones. In fact, one we have not talked about yet, 2-0 Houston visiting 2-0 Minnesota. Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones in Minnesota. Probably no Addison in this game. I don't know if Jalen Naylor is too wild for me in this. But when you look at Houston, Cam Akers, CJ Stroud, Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, who's questionable but probably going to play, and Dalton Schultz here. There's a lot of difference makers in this game. More of them are on Houston, but Minnesota has some playmakers too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, dude, shout out Nico Collins. I think of anybody in this Houston offense, he has been the one to just really show everybody, I know that our team brought in Stephon Diggs this offseason. I know that Tank Dell was really good in the opportunities that he received last year, but I am still the bona fide number 1 receiver in this offense. This is still my show and I control it. A 27.7% target share so far this season. Nico is absolutely that guy. And to the point where, as I keep saying this out loud, I'm talking myself into it, man. I think I would be more than happy to include Nico Collins in this one.
So we got Collins, and he is our second to last flex. He joins Devonta Smith and Amon-Ra St. Brown as our receivers. We have to pick out one flex and one quarterback. Now, as I look over the rest of these games, I just want to make sure I didn't leave any games out that we should talk about, because different. There's definitely some. I want to make sure we explored all the difference makers on all this all the squads. There's There's one other Niners Rams. Do we want to stay away from that one? And we already grabbed Jordan Mason. I apologize. We have Jordan Mason on that team or on that game. And then Cincinnati, the 0-2 Cincinnati Bengals, which are 7.5-point favorites against the Commanders. We already put Brian Robinson on our team. If Robinson has a good game, does that necessarily mean that Joe Burrow, does that mean that Jamar Chase, even T. Higgins are having big games? Do we want to do anything with the Bengals here?
I want to do something with the Bengals. I'm not sure exactly what. I'll probably leave that final choice up to you, but I will say, like, the Commanders' defense, I swear, is the worst defense in the league by far. Like, they are at the bottom of so many different categories that it would take me probably the next 10 minutes to say them all out loud. The secondary has never been worse. I have lived in the greater Washington, D.C. area for almost 30 years now. I've seen a lot of terrible defense being played. This is probably some of the worst. Somebody on this Bengals team is going to catch super long bombs, find the end zone multiple times, and Joe Burrow is going to be fantastic. It's just a matter of picking which one.
So Jimmy Williams is saying got to be Chris Godwin in the flex. Burrow is quarterback, done. I can see that as well. Now, I am leaning towards Chase because I kind of like getting a running quarterback as our quarterback, Herms. And the ones that we do have available to us in this, the way we've built our team so far, we have Josh Allen at home against the Jaguars available to us. We have Kyler Murray at home against the Lions available to us. We have Anthony Richardson at home against the Bears available. And I think that's where it stops. I don't want to get crazy with Fields. So I think as far as quarterback goes, I'll let you pick. But Richardson, Murray, or Allen, those would be my preferences. Although Jimmy Williams is saying we should throw Joe Burrow into the mix as well. So we'll throw that in the gumbo. Which flavor is the strongest?
As much as, like, I love the concept as Joe Burrow as quarterback, you mentioned too many good quarterback alternatives that I think we should probably just go with one of them. Throwing Jamar Chase in here just feels like a really good idea. I think we can pencil that in for sure. And then, as much as I really like Anthony Richardson this week, I wrote him up as one of my start picks in my start sit column for the 33rd team. Free plug. But Kyler Murray, dude, like, the fact that he's around and we know that that's probably going to be a super high scoring affair, just like the vibes on that are too strong to pass up.
All right, we got it. That's our team. Here's what Herms and I have put together tonight. Feel free to enter it if you'd like. The quarterback is Kyler Murray. The running backs, Brian Robinson, Jordan Mason, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. The receivers are Devonta Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, and Jamar Chase. And the tight end is Brock Bowers. Easy game. We just won it. $2,500. Thank us later. Go to myffpc.com. Enter this into the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Again, we didn't draft. We didn't use a salary cap. We just chose the 10 players that we thought would be best. Only one player per team. We're going to watch them ride throughout the weekend's games. $35 to enter, $200 to enter, depending upon the price point you want to play at, and you can win up to $2,500. That's at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. For the final segment of the show, we have a bevy of starts and sits, even more than you have given us tonight on the show. So Herms and I will get to those, including Herms' award-winning defense and special teams mind we will access tonight and try to figure out which defenses we should be playing this week as well. He's Herms from the 33rd team and Fantasy Points, as well as Optimus Fantasy. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
Flair once said, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And if you want to be the man or woman this fantasy football season, you got to play over at myffpc.com. That's where all the best fantasy gamers play. That's where all the high stakes gamers play, because they've got the high stakes leagues. They have the best formats. They have the best payouts. It's the place to be. And if you win a FFPC main event or a Fantasy Pros Championship contest over there, you put some serious respect on your name and some money in your pocket. Anyone can win their hometown league, right? You're probably a great fantasy gamer. Prove it. You go out and win an event like this, You can go and put in your Twitter bio or X bio, FFPC main event champion. That means something. That's definitive proof that you're one of the best fantasy gamers in the world. So go over to myffpc.com and use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. And now you're on your road to greatness, right? You could even do an online draft, or you can go and draft in Las Vegas with the stars. Draft at Planet Hollywood for the FFPC main event. That's where they're all doing it. It's awesome stuff. So get set up now so that you can be a star this year. You can be the man. Just like Ric Flair, you can be a champion. Woo!
McMillan is this year's Puka Nacua. He's everything you want in Roma Dunze at half the price. Now, this could be true, but we have the opportunity of more than just a few characters. We can go deep in this. Why is Jalen McMillan, and in what sense is Jalen McMillan this year's Puka Nacua?
Listen, Washington, they had some stud wide receivers, Adunze, McMillan, Jalen Polk that no one's talking about right now. And somehow McMillan has been completely overshadowed because of what his teammates were able to accomplish. As for slot receivers, he's right up there. He's one of the smoothest operators out there. But people forget that before his injury last season, in those first 3 games, he was right up there with Adunze as far as yards and touchdowns were concerned in those first 3 games. The season prior, he had more receptions. As a sophomore, more yards and higher yards per route run. Praise Odunze all you want. Yeah, you should. He deserves the praise. But McMillan is going to be a great offer later on in these drafts. I'm getting those Puka Nacua type vibes out of him. And when I say Puka Nacua, he's going to be this year's Puka Nacua. It's not like he's going to go out there and put up 1,500 yards and be an all-pro. No, I'm talking about exactly what is going on here when the people are getting negative about this comment. You're already looking down on McMillan. And not one damn person out there, and I'll say this right now, no one had Puka Nacua as the wide receiver run in the rookie class last season. I guarantee you. Why do I guarantee you? Because I got him at 408 in a draft. That's where I'm going with this. Jalen McMillan is a guy that you're getting at the end of the 3rd round or in the 4th round of your rookie drafts that is going to give you production. He's going to be one of those wide receivers. You're like, oh, crap. All right, excellent.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network rolls on here. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He is CH Herms from the 33rd team, Fantasy Points, and of course, Optimus Fantasy. Follow him on the X at CH_Herms. Still no score in the Thursday night game. However, the Jets have put together a drive here as they are knocking on the door of the red zone. Aaron Rodgers just hitting, was that, no, it's an incomplete pass. Incomplete pass out of bounds, 2nd and 10. From the 21 as the Jets are driving here. Breece Hall already with 28 total yards, including 2 catches. Lazard with a catch. Ramondre Stevenson, 1 carry for 1 yard. And Hunter Henry, 1 catch for 0 yards. So not a lot of action yet. We'll get you through this game, or at least probably through the first quarter of this game, as Garrett Wilson is unable to haul in that catch along the sideline. Let's go with some starter sits this week, Herms, and we'll kick things off with running backs. Jerome Ford against the Giants at home, or Zamir White, who is at home against the Carolina Panthers.
I'm going to go with Jerome Ford on this one. I mean, he's definitely the leader of this Cleveland backfield, and I can't really confidently say the same about Zamir White with the Raiders. I mean, like, yeah, Alexander Madison kind of vultured a touchdown last week. Wasn't super involved, but the reason I'm a little bit concerned is because Zamir White really just hasn't done a whole heck of a lot. Yeah. It's a really weird running game that I just don't really want to count on. It's one of the things we were talking about before is a huge, boon in the favor of Brock Bowers. They are passing the ball a lot more in Las Vegas than I certainly expected them to. It's just not an identity of their team, whereas the Browns, for as many struggles as Deshaun Watson continues to have a quarterback, if they don't establish any sort of run game, that offense quite literally doesn't work. So by virtue of that alone, you go with a guy like Jerome Ford.
Yeah, it's Ford. The Raiders' rush offense has not been great, and there's a bit of a committee going on there with Madison scoring a couple of touchdowns already on the season. So I'm Team Ford here. Austin Eckler or Javonte Williams. Eckler this week is going to be going up against the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football in the Queen City, and Javonte Williams obviously taking on the Buccaneers on the road. You have a strong feeling here, Williams or Eckler? You can only pick one.
For as much as I gave credit to Brian Robinson Jr. earlier for establishing a very sizable, lead in his own backfield there with the Commanders, Austin Eckler is still more valuable to me than Javonte Williams, because Javonte Williams so far is just not doing very well. 37% share of Denver's backfield touches, and also faces a stacked box front from the defense on 12.5% of his carries, which is the 14th highest clip among running backs so far in 2024. It's difficult to dominate a backfield when you're not even getting the majority of the touches, and then when you are, you're getting smacked by these defensive fronts because they know what's coming. I don't want to start anybody from the Denver Broncos right now. I'm just completely avoiding that offense as a whole.
I think that's what it comes down to. I love the Commanders' offense this year, even though they didn't score a touchdown last week against the Giants. I still think that there's much more upside there. Austin Eckler had 7.7 points last week on catches alone. I mean, he also had 38 yards on the ground, but he's still being involved in both facets of the game. I think Eckler is the play here. Bucky Irving or Tyjae Spears. Bucky Irving for Tampa this week, who is going to be taking on the Denver Broncos at home in Florida. And then you have Tyjae Spears, who is also at home against the Green Bay Packers. I think that the Colts, for whatever reason, went away from Jonathan Taylor way too fast last week. They hardly touched the ball in the fourth quarter. I think Pollard's in for a big game. That could be collateral damage for Tyjae Spears. Collateral damage, in other words, he's going to get a lot of carries too. However, Herms, these are backfields going in opposite ways. I think that Spears and Pollard are getting further and further from each other as far as fantasy usage goes, or NFL usage goes, and Irving and White are getting closer. I like Irving here over Spears.
I agree with you for sure. I think it's also possible that Bucky Irving is going to make this backfield a 50-50 split as soon as this week, like firmly entrenched in that role there. He is continuing to get more and more involved. And honestly, Tony Pollard deserves a lot of credit, man. I know a lot of people really wanted Tyjae Spears to be a thing, but Tony Pollard is dominating this backfield right now. And until, he gets hurt or, fumbles away the job or something and he gives them a reason to, there's no point. So, and also, look, if the Buccaneers get up super big in this one, who's going to be in to kind of salt away, whatever sort of victory and get those kind of valuable experience building touches? The rookie. You want Bucky Irving to be in there to get that kind of experience. So I'm definitely more comfortable with that.
Getting back to the Thursday night game, it is a 7-0 game now. Aaron Rodgers hits his old Packers teammate Alan Lazard for a 10-yard touchdown pass. It is now 4:21 to go in the first quarter. Jets up 7-0 on the New England Patriots. More on that before we sign off tonight. Moving ahead to the wide receivers. This is a case of two players that I have opposite ownership on, and I wish I had the flip of it. I have a lot of Amari Cooper this year and not very much Rashid Shaheed. And yet it's Shaheed who is leading the Saints in receiving. It is Shaheed who is at home against the Eagles this week. It is Shaheed that is undefeated. It is Amari Cooper that has been struggling. Amari Cooper at home against the Giants. I'm a weak man, Herms. I'm not strong enough to start Shaheed over Cooper this week, even though that may be the right choice. I'm still going to lean into Cooper here. He has these big-time games every so often. I think this could be a big-time game for him this week.
I think so too, but as I've mentioned a few times on this broadcast, I am just a sucker for the good vibes. I'm really a sucker for the vibes of the Saints.
Ride it out until it stops. So good. You're going with Shaheed here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Lesperm in YouTube right now wants to know if we're answering questions. Yes, Lesperm. If you have questions regarding fantasy football, not the meaning of life, Herms and I will do the best that we can to answer them. Calvin Ridley or Brian Thomas. This has been like the Brian Thomas episode tonight. We've talked so much about him here. Brian Thomas this week is going to Buffalo to take on the Bills. Calvin Ridley, again, at home against the Green Bay Packers this week. Herms, where do you go here, Ridley or Thomas?
I'm going to have to go with Calvin Ridley. I mean, the Titans offense is weird, but he has nearly a quarter of the team's target share going in his direction. And thus far through these couple of games, 2.5 points per target for Calvin Ridley. Shout out fantasy data on that one. Great resource. Yeah, dude, like as long as he continues to stay hot and can really deliver like this, there's really not much of a reason to go away from it. But Brian Thomas is not a bad choice either. You know, I get why this would be a tough call for people.
Target volume is what makes my decision on this. I think that the Titans are going to struggle this week. I mean, they've struggled the last couple of weeks, but their tackle situation. I mean, their offensive line is no bueno. And their right tackle is among the worst in the NFL. Rashawn Gary will be lining up against him, and Gary is going to have the opportunity to finally go up against a quarterback that is not mobile, or at least as mobile as Anthony Richardson and Jalen Hurts were the first 2 weeks. I think the Packers defense puts a lot of pressure on him, and I don't know if it gives Ridley enough time to get open. That said, it may not matter because the Titans will scheme him in. I trust Ridley more than Thomas. Thomas with a much smaller target share. So that said, everything I said bad about the Titans, I'm still picking Ridley here as well. Christian Kirk or Khalil Shakir? We talked a lot about Kirk tonight. Kirk, again, at Buffalo, and you're looking at Khalil Shakir, who is at home against the Jaguars. If you had to pick one of these guys in this game, and it's Kirk or Shakir, which one would it be?
I know that logic says you should go with Christian Kirk because at some point it has to turn around. I think he's the more talented player. He has the longer track record and all that stuff. But like I was saying before, I have been personally hurt too much by Christian Kirk to do it. It makes me so sad. I think I would just go with Shakir for this week because I want to see it from Christian Kirk before I put him in that lineup. I need to make damn sure.
Khalil Shakir leading the Bills in targets last week. He catches all of them, 5 for 54 yards. I think Kirk clearly has the higher ceiling here, which is probably why I lean towards him. But if you are confident in the rest of your team and you want to take a more conservative approach, I think Khalil Shakir is a more conservative guy. I still go with Kirk here, although it is close. Let's move on to tight ends here, Herms. As we have a couple minutes. Yeah, we got time to do all the tight ends I want to do here and still get to quarterbacks and defenses. Zach Ertz or Isaiah Likely. Ertz, who's been a huge target hog thus far for the Commanders, and then Isaiah Likely, who is on the surprisingly 0-2 Baltimore Ravens heading down to Dallas. He the second tight end. I don't want to say the backup, but the second tight end for Baltimore. You got to pick one, Likely or Ertz.
Ertz just has a more established role. I think, he's played so far on 72.4% of the Commanders' snaps, 15.1% target share. Even though they have yet to find the end zone through the passing game in DC, I just think that is going to be something that's going to unfold eventually, and Ertz is going to be a big beneficiary of that. Everything we were saying earlier in the show about Isaiah Likely possibly being relevant as part of this Ravens offense long-term is still true. But, we just need to see that play out a little bit more before we get super confident in him. Yeah, I think for that reason alone, just Ertz.
Ertz has been seeing a lot more targets than Likely. Ertz is trending in a better direction than Likely. He is definitely the less explosive player. So as much as I say, I want Kirk because he's got the higher ceiling, I'm actually going to go with Ertz here at a position that doesn't necessarily feature explosiveness as far as fantasy value. I think it's all about volume with tight ends, and Ertz is simply getting more of it than Likely right now. I'm with you, Ertz over Likely. Colby Parkinson or Dalton Schultz. I mentioned this on my local fantasy football show I do here in Northeast Wisconsin today. Parkinson could be one of those guys that is better in theory than in real life. He had the opportunity to catch a bunch of balls last week after Cooper Kupp went down, and yet what did he do last week? 2 targets, 1 catch, 12 yards. And I know they're getting drilled, but but that's the game where you got to make your hay, right? That is when the sun's shining. Colby
Yeah.
Parkinson should have got a lot more. He didn't. Dalton Schultz practiced again today. I trust his volume more, even with all those talented receivers around him. I'm going to roll with Schultz over Parkinson. What would you do, Herms?
I think it's really close, and I'm tempted to agree with you. I'm erring toward Parkinson, if only because just thinking about it from just a game plan perspective for what the Rams are going to have to do with the offensive line also being banged up, getting the ball out quick out of Matthew Stafford's hands is going to be very important. And I think that being able to lean on a tight end in very short areas of the field is going to be easier for them to do. So I think given the circumstances, that might be where I go. But to your point, like Dalton Schultz is in a much better offense. It is going to be a much, kind of higher scoring potential from that perspective. I think the answer ultimately comes down to whether you really need to take a big swing or you really need to be a little bit more conservative with your lineup.
Final tight end I'll discuss tonight, Tucker Kraft or Jonnu Smith. Tucker Kraft in Tennessee. Jonnu Smith is in Seattle. Kraft is a guy that has vastly outsnapped Luke Musgrave over the first 2 weeks in Green Bay and has made his share of plays, both blocking and receiving. The reason I'm picking Jonnu Smith here is because with Skylar Thompson running the offense, I think it's much easier to get Jonnu Smith going than maybe a guy like Jalen Waddle or even Tyreek Hill to a certain extent. I think Jonnu Smith is going to feature more in the game plan. Tucker Kraft is fine in real life, but when you're trying to start him in fantasy and you're still dealing with Musgrave and Reed and Watson and Wicks and Dobbs and Jacobs and all these guys, plus maybe Malik Willis throwing the ball, Tucker Kraft's a fine guy to have on your team. I don't want to start him this week. I'd play Jonnu Smith over Kraft.
I feel similarly. I think Kraft is my long-term answer to this question, but obviously that's not what we're going for. This is a this week thing. So yeah, Jonnu Smith for that, but I want to shout out Tucker Kraft for being able to establish being kind of like the clear tight end one there in Green Bay. He has the snap share of 95.5%, dude. Like, I think he's winning that. He is going to be the Packers tight end, but that's not going to matter till Jordan Love gets back. Like, you're looking for some long-term answers, buy into that, but not now. Not now.
Packers love the physicality that Tucker Kraft is bringing to Green Bay. Matt LaFleur was asked, are these snaps going to get more balanced out in week 2? And he said, yeah, I mean, we got to get Musgrave on the field more. And Musgrave was on the field more, but it was still 25 fewer snaps than Tucker Kraft. Quarterbacks, how about a couple of running ones? And you could have both these guys in your team. I've seen it done in the FFPC this year. Anthony Richardson or Jaden Daniels. You got to pick one. Richardson at home against the Bears. Jaden Daniels in Cincinnati on Monday Night Football.
The really difficult thing is that I have them ranked back-to-back in my rankings this week. So that's definitely a bit of a challenge, admittedly.
So they're both very good starts, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. They're both top 12. I think you're going fine either way, but I lean toward Jaden Daniels, if only because I believe more in his ability to not turn the ball over. Whereas Anthony Richardson, he's a bit of a YOLO guy. He's out there just launching bombs, doing whatever he can. And the Bears defense, young, but very talented, very impressive so far this year. I think they're going to continue to be a unit in ascent, and just it's a more dangerous matchup. So Jaden Daniels would probably be more conservative, but probably the better choice.
Yeah, it's tough for me to get away from Daniels. He was the quarterback I drafted most this year, so I'm probably biased against him. I think you can make the case that, he's on the road and Richardson's at home, but I'm with you. That Bears defense, I think, is sneaky good. A lot of people want to talk about the Chicago offense. It's that defense that I think is going to keep them in a lot of games this year. We saw what the Packers defense was able to do against Anthony Richardson. Now, he still got his, but he didn't have a Buffalo game. I think it could be similar this week. So I'm going to roll with Daniels here. Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield next up here. Which one would you rather start? Goff is in Arizona. Mayfield is at home against the Broncos. The Goff game, as I've pointed out several times on the show tonight, that is one of the highest totals in the NFL for week 3, with the Lions and Cardinals coming in at 51.5. In fact, I think that is the highest total. Baker Mayfield, while the total is not as high, in that Buccaneers Broncos game. It's only 40.5. The Buccaneers are a 6.5 point favorite, and we know how inefficient that Buccaneers ground game has been. I feel like give me the guys that are going to get in the shootout. I don't see any kind of shootout in Tampa with the Broncos, and worse yet, it's the Buccaneers that would not be throwing the ball to catch up in the game and beat Denver. So I'm going to take Goff because whether they're winning, whether they're losing, they're going to be throwing the ball. I like him over Mayfield this week.
I agree, man. I think coming into the show, I have Mayfield ranked like a couple spots above Jared Goff, but the more we've talked about it through these various segments, the more it's really occurred to me that I think I just might be incorrect. I think I really do have to lean on the potential of that shootout for Detroit and go with Jared Goff. He's going to be moving up my ranks. I'm glad we've had this exercise.
Right. Yeah. Champagne 7 on YouTube. We're going to get to your question in a little bit. I want to finish up on the quarterbacks here as Alan Lazard just catches another big pass. My goodness, on 3rd and 6, he gets about 25, and the Jets are close to midfield. Second quarter now underway. New York winning 7-0. A Patriot is down on the field. Not sure who it is. Might be. It's Jabril Peppers, the safety. So more on that as we go forward. The Jets starting the drive at their own 10, and then on 3rd and 6, like I said, about a 25-yard gain to Alan Lazard. Derek Carr or Justin Fields. You can get the QB2 right now in fantasy football Herms, or you can start Justin Fields, who has infinitely more leg talent than Derek Carr. However, he is saddled with an offense that loves to run the ball and play defense, and he's not exactly the most prolific passer in the world. Is it Carr or is it Fields? I have a feeling it's Carr for you.
It's going to be Carr for me for sure. And I think I tweeted this a few days ago. The Steelers offense currently ranks 21st in total offense DVOA, 22nd in Pro Football References expected points, 28th in offensive yards per play with 4.2 yards per play. The only thing that's really working in Pittsburgh is the fact that they're not turning the ball over. So I like seeing Justin Fields do well. I'm a lifelong fan of the team. It's cool. He's going to run the ball. But the difference between New Orleans offense right now and Pittsburgh's offense right now is almost night and day. So you shoot with what's working, and as long as Derek Carr continues to be, the conductor of the beautiful New Orleans orchestra that is this offense, you got to keep it going.
You do have to keep it going. We're going to keep the start sits going here. This is from Champagne 7, wide receiver question. Can only start one of these receivers, I'm assuming. Christian Watson, Ladd McConkey, Cortland Sutton, or Jacoby Myers. The guy I'm going to throw out right away is Christian Watson. I understand the upside, but at the same time, it's probably Malik Willis, and he's contending with a lot of other talented players on that team. Myers is fine, but understand that he's at best, I should say, the third option on that team. I'm going to probably lean towards McConkey or Sutton here. We kind of talked about Sutton and how we're down on the Broncos offense in general. And that's why I lean towards Ladd McConkey here, even though it's at Pittsburgh. I feel like he makes enough plays. He's not going to go crazy, but I could see 5 for 60 pretty easily, maybe a 50% chance of a touchdown here. Maybe that's a little bit too bullish, but that's the way I see it. I think McConkey's my pick here, Herms.
I'm the same way. Plus, the Steelers' starting slot cornerback is a second-year UDFA who really doesn't have a lot of playing experience. I think it could be a matchup that could be exploitable for McConkey.
Getting back to defenses here to close out the show. Chicago Bears or Green Bay Packers. Now, bear in mind, Herms was the most accurate defense predictor, according to Fantasy Pros last year. So we will tap into his expert brain here. Bears and Packers. Packers at Tennessee. Bears at Indianapolis.
I'm just going to have to go with the Bears and everything that we've seen from them so far this season. I mean, they've had at least 3 sacks in every contest so far. They're very young and capable secondary. And kind of like we were talking about before, Anthony Richardson is just prone to making a lot of these, kind of unforced errors due to the archetype of quarterback that he is.
I'm going to go with my Green Bay Packers here. I'm probably biased, but I will say this. Will Levis has made some of the most questionable decision-making since Paxton Lynch decided to put together one of the weirdest wardrobes I've ever seen, showing up to press conferences after he was drafted by the Broncos. Packers leading the league in takeaways right now. I think Will Levis gives them not only the opportunity to get a couple of turnovers, but maybe a scoop and score, maybe a pick six. It's close. I like the Bears this week as well, but I like the Packers a little bit better. How about the two other teams in those games? Indianapolis Colts facing Caleb Williams and the Bears, or the Tennessee Titans in a revenge game against Malik Willis in Green Bay?
I think it's pretty easy for people to want to bet on a defense going up against Malik Willis, and I think both options are startable, and I'm not going to blame anybody either way, but the Colts going up against that Bears offense, like the running game basically doesn't exist. Caleb Williams still has not been able to find the end zone yet. I don't even think he threw for over 100 yards in that last game, if I remember correctly. So, like, yeah, dude, like, it's the vibes are just not good for Chicago right now. I'm betting on the Colts.
Real fast on this last one. It's a weird one. I'm going to start the Chargers defense at Justin Fields rather than the Ravens defense that is going to Big D to take on Prescott. Would you agree?
I would completely agree. Love Justin Fields, but damn, that offense is weird.
CH_Herms on X. Fantasy Points and the 33rd team is where to go to read all your writings. And then the Nate and Herms show on Optimus Fantasy, anywhere you get podcasts, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're the man, Herms. This is so much fun. We'll do this again for sure. Thank you so much for being awesome.
Thanks for having me, man. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. MyFFPC.com is where to go to play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. That is filling up as we speak. MyFFPC.com. Win up to $2,500 this week. I want to thank Sean Engel, our producer, and CH Herms for coming on tonight. Next Thursday, Blair Andrews from RotoViz is going to be popping on with me for the full 2 hours. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of the Thursday night game, and good luck in week 3. I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.